Welcome back to the Steampunk Years Volume 6. Let's continue the story. Next chapter, Shelley whispered from the door. Safe. Ryan glided in, unseen from the prying eyes of the bored MPs on patrol. Another victory for the stealthy sneaker, Shelley said with a grin once he was safely inside. Ryan huffed, brushing imaginary dust off his sleeve. Maybe someday all this sneaking will come in handy if I make it to spy level. Shelley arched an eyebrow. Oh? Before he could react, she punched him lightly in the arm. You're already pretty good at it. They stepped into the living room, where all the curtains were drawn, casting the space in a soft, muted glow. A familiar sight greeted them, tea set neatly on the table, delicate cups waiting, steam curling from the pot. Oh dear, my favorite. Shelley gave an exaggerated bow. But of course, she said, adopting the perfect Victorian maid's tone. Ryan chuckled as he dropped into a chair. You're so good at that, Shelley smirked, pouring the tea with flawless precision. It's a gift. The moment settled, warm and familiar. The world outside was a mess, patrols, orders, and secrecy. But here, inside this room, it didn't touch them. Ryan turned, eyes glinting with anticipation. So, did you get it? Shelley smiled, her expression triumphant. The deep red one was out of stock, but I got the next best thing. I found an auburn. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Oh, is that so? He sighed dramatically, folding his arms. Then I suppose it'll have to do, my dear. Shelley grinned, tossing the package across the room. Ryan caught it in a flash, flipping it once in his hand before inspecting it like a jeweler appraising a diamond. His eyes shimmered with satisfaction. Beautiful. He looked up, a mischievous smirk forming. Now for the trinkets. Shelley rolled her eyes, but reached down, pulling out her large trinket box and setting it on the table with a flourish. The worn brass hinges creaked slightly, revealing an assortment of bracelets, rings, beads, and brooches, each one catching the dim light in a different way. You're going to look marvelous, she grinned, sliding the box toward him. Ryan wiggled his fingers dramatically. Let's make some magic. The tea sat forgotten for a moment as they sorted through the shimmering collection, laughter bubbling between them like something rare, something untouched by the weight of the outside world. After the usual small talk and teasing died down, the mood in the room shifted. Shelley leaned forward slightly, tapping her fingers against her cup. So, your parents really are coming to see you next week? For sure? Ryan exhaled, nodding once. Yes, I found out today. He hesitated, then glanced at Shelley with a knowing look. And I could really use your help again if you're up for it. Shelley's lips curled into a grin. Okay, so the usual. Ryan sighed, shaking his head with a half-smile. You know how worried Dad gets when he sees me without a girly friend. Shelley clapped her hands together. One weekend girlfriend coming up. Relief flooded through Ryan. He reached out, giving Shelley's hand a small squeeze. Thank you. Shelley chuckled, but her expression softened. She set her tea down, eyes flicking over Ryan carefully. You know, she said, voice quieter now, you're going to have to tell them eventually. Ryan's smile faded. Shelley's tone was gentle but firm. I can't be your girlfriend forever. Ryan looked down at his half-empty cup, his fingers tracing the rim. Yeah, someday. A long pause. His voice dropped, barely above a whisper. Mom might understand, but Dad... He trailed off, staring into his tea as if it held an answer he wasn't ready to hear. Shelley didn't push. She just stayed there, sipping her tea in quiet solidarity. Because someday wasn't today, but it was coming. Ryan rose and walked to the full-length mirror. Carefully, he opened the package and drew out the auburn wig, fingers brushing over the strands. He placed it on with practiced ease, then stood still, studying the reflection that stared back. Dad would just never understand, he murmured, the words barely more than breath against the glass. Next chapter. Ryan walked into the barracks, blending in effortlessly with the rows of soldiers, standard fatigues, standard posture, standard mask of indifference. The hum of conversation filled the air, boots scuffing against the worn floors, the scent of sweat and stale coffee hanging heavy. It was just another day, until Pete came barreling toward him, eyes wide with excitement. Ryan, you'll never guess what the rumor is. Ryan stopped mid-step and swung around fast, catching Pete dead in the eyes. What exactly is this rumor, Pete? Pete skidded to a halt, nearly crashing into him. Dude, you know I hate when you do that, Ryan grinned. Gets you every time. Someday you're going to run right into me and I'll finally get to say I told you so. Pete rolled his eyes. Yeah. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to make it clear this wasn't just barracks gossip. "The rumor is swirling that we're getting assigned to Goral Mines." Ryan froze. The easy banter evaporated in an instant. His stomach turned cold. "Shit." He swallowed, forcing a casual shrug. "I hope it's only a rumor." But something in Pete's face told him it wasn't. And if that was the case, things were about to get a lot worse. Right before lights out, the barracks buzzed with low voices and restless energy. A loose circle of soldiers sprawled across bunks and footlockers, engaged in their usual pre-sleep ritual. Rumors, speculation, and bullshit stories. Numbers were tossed around. Casual statements became fact. Ryan leaned against his bunk, listening first, then slipping into the conversation. "Can't be true." A muscular soldier across from him scoffed. "My former girlfriend's MP friend swore to God it's real." The room quieted slightly as he leaned in, lowering his voice for maximum effect. The FB took the guy's head clean off and put it on a pike. A pause. Took it into firefights. The barracks went still for a second. One soldier muttered, "Bullshit." The muscular soldier shook his head. "Not bullshit. The Forgeborn do crazy shit like that to psych out their enemies." The joker of the group, who rarely took anything seriously, lit up. "Yeah? Well, my girlfriend's brother knows your MP friend and told me he's full of shit half the time." Laughter broke the tension, the sound rolling through the barracks like a wave. Someone snorted, "Yeah, well, you won't be laughing when it's your damn head on a stick." The laughter died down just as the overhead lights clicked off. A booming voice echoed through the barracks. "Lights out!" The group shifted, muttering final thoughts as they settled into their bunks. Ryan lay back, staring at the ceiling, silent. He wasn't convinced it was bullshit, and something in his gut told him they were about to find out. Next chapter. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, the stiff suit and tie feeling more like a noose than formal wear. The restaurant was warm, too warm, the clink of silverware and hushed conversations doing little to settle the unease creeping into his chest. Beside him, Shelley sat poised, perfectly at ease, playing her role with practiced grace. Across the table, Mr. and Mrs. Towers sat in their usual way. His mother, Lisa, radiant and warm, his father, Frank, stone-faced but observant. Shelley was the first to break the silence, her voice smooth and confident. "Lisa, Frank, so good to see you both again." Lisa beamed, reaching across the table to squeeze Shelley's hand. "You look incredible, Shelley. So good to see you again." Ryan glanced over at Shelley and found himself smiling despite everything. "She looks darling, yes." As soon as the word left his mouth, he knew. Frank's eyebrow lifted slightly, a small movement, barely noticeable, but enough. Ryan swallowed, resisting the urge to adjust his tie. Shit. But his father said nothing. Small talk filled the space, carrying them through polite conversation about work, life, and the little nothings that kept things safe. Until, inevitably, Frank decided to say it. Blunt as ever, he leaned forward slightly and cut straight through the niceties. "So listen, you two have been dating for what, 4 years now? When the hell are you popping the question, Ryan?" Ryan's heart sank. He should have expected it. Of course, his father would bring it up here, of all places. A public restaurant where Ryan couldn't afford to react, couldn't escape, couldn't cause a scene. Lisa let out a sharp gasp, slapping Frank's shoulder. "You'll have to excuse Mr. Can't Keep His Mouth Shut, Ryan." Shelley smiled, but her hand subtly tightened around her glass. Ryan forced a chuckle, grasping for time. "You know, Dad, you were 31 before tying the knot with Mom." He leaned back slightly, forcing himself to sound light-hearted. "I'm still a few years away from that." Lisa laughed nervously, the sound carrying a silent plea, hoping Frank would let it go. Frank didn't look convinced. Ryan could feel the weight of his father's gaze pressing against him, waiting for something he wasn't ready to give. But for now, the conversation had shifted just enough to keep the truth buried a little longer. Ryan cleared his throat, forcing his voice to stay casual. "So, I thought I'd tell you both, my squad is going to the mine soon." The shift was immediate. Lisa's expression flickered between shock and unease, her fingers tightening around her napkin. Frank, on the other hand, showed something else, a look that was hard to place. After a beat, Frank nodded, leaning back in his chair. "You give them hell down there. I hear it's a shit show." Shelley turned toward Ryan, her eyes flashing with concern. "Really?" Ryan exhaled, nodding. "Yeah. Started as rumors, but it was confirmed this afternoon." Shelley's grip tightened on his hand beneath the table. "When do you leave?" He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he reached for his drink, letting the weight of the words settle before finally answering. "Go time is next week." Frank's expression hardened. "Listen, His voice was firm, low. "If it looks like they're going to take a shot at you, don't think twice. Shoot the bastards." Ryan felt Shelley stiffen beside him. He squeezed her hand slightly, hoping to ground her, or maybe himself. Across the table, Lisa had gone quiet. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and she sighed, the kind of sigh that carried years of exhaustion. By this point, it was clear she had all but given up. She knew there was no stopping this, no changing it. Frank's world was black and white. Ryan was a soldier. This was war, and no matter how much she hated it, no matter how much it hurt her, she had learned long ago that fighting it was useless. So she simply stirred her tea, staring down at the cup as if it held answers she would never find. The conversation had to keep moving, but something hung there, unspoken, and no one at the table was brave enough to name it. Every awkward moment you'd expect from one of these family get-togethers had happened, as if they were checking off a list. Forced small talk. Check. Uncomfortable silences. Check. A not-so-subtle interrogation about marriage. Check. Now finally it was mercifully over. Lisa and Shelley stood near Frank's truck, their conversation low and easy, the way two people who actually liked each other spoke. Ryan, on the other hand, stood by his own car, a compact, nondescript vehicle, flicking through messages on his communicator, trying to look busy. He barely had time to react when he noticed his father approaching. Frank had stepped a little way off to light a cigarette, but now he strode over, taking a long drag before exhaling slowly. Ryan tensed. There was always one last thing with his father. Frank came to a stop beside him, smoke curling in the cool night air. "You know women don't wait forever, right?" Ryan let out a slow breath. "Here we go. 4 years of waiting?" Frank shook his head. "That's not good for you. If they don't think you're the type to commit, they leave for greener pastures." Ryan said nothing, keeping his expression neutral. Frank took another slow drag before continuing. "You do know your mother and I want grandkids someday." Ryan forced himself to look understanding, nodding just enough to keep the conversation moving. "Of course, Frank cut him off. "If you don't think she's the one, find the one, and fast." His voice was firm, final. "Your 20s go fast, your 30s go faster, and so on. Remember that." Before Ryan could respond, Frank shoved something against his stomach, a restaurant brochure of all things. Ryan barely managed to grab it before his father turned and walked away, flicking the cigarette into the pavement. And just like that, the night ended with hugs, like nothing had happened. Like every unspoken expectation hadn't just been laid at Ryan's feet, like he wasn't trapped between two lives that refused to meet in the middle. And there was nothing left to do but drive home in silence. Next chapter. Ryan looked in the mirror, adjusting the drape of his warm yellow cardigan over his black and yellow sundress. The large-rimmed sunglasses resting on his nose gave him a playful edge, like he had just stepped out of a different life, one untouched by military bases, classified files, or the weight of the past. He turned toward Shelley with a smirk. "I have something for you, dear, for having to endure that awful, terrible, never-ending night." Shelley grinned, placing a hand on her chest dramatically. "For little old me?" Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a restaurant brochure, holding it out like it was a priceless relic. "So you'll never forget the night from hell." Shelley took one look at it and erupted into laughter. "That was brutal, but we're soldiers. We survived." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head before tilting his face toward the window. "Someday we're going out and actually enjoying the daylight. Maybe go rock hunting." Ryan's eyes lit up. "Hunting rocks," Shelley nodded. "Supposedly there's a type of volcanic rock that glows under blacklight." Ryan cracked a real, genuine smile, one untouched by the weight of deception or war. "I'm in, dear." He twirled, enjoying the way the dress flared around him before catching sight of something across the room. "How are the kitties?" Shelley walked over to a small box tucked into the corner, peering inside. She pointed to a tiny kitten nestled at the edge. "This is the runt. The others don't seem to like him." Ryan moved closer, looking into the box. The smallest kitten was struggling, his tiny paws pushing at the others, trying to fit into their warm circle, but they wouldn't let him in. His heart sank. He raised an eyebrow above the large lensed sunglasses, fuming. "We'll see about that." Before Shelley could say anything, Ryan scooped the kitten up. "If they don't want him, I do." He held him close, feeling the fragile warmth of his tiny body against his palm. Shelley sat down beside him, watching quietly. "I found the box next to a dumpster on base." Ryan's breath hitched. "What?" Shelley exhaled. "Some of the soldiers were raising them for bedding." Ryan's stomach turned. For fighting? Shelley nodded, her voice grim. Yeah, I guess that's considered fun for them. Ryan stared down at the kitten now safe in his hands. 4 little ones, saved. The tiny thing gave a small, weak mew, his body still trembling from being left out in the cold. Ryan held him closer, cupping his small form in his hands, feeling his heartbeat, too fast, too fragile. His vision blurred and breath hitched. Before he even realized what was happening, tears streamed down his face. He didn't wipe them away, didn't hide them. He just held on, because no one, not a soldier, not a person, not even the smallest of creatures deserved to be thrown away. Shelley took one look at Ryan, eyes brimming with tears, cradling the tiny kitten in his hands, and shot up from her seat. Oh, no, you don't. Ryan blinked, startled. Shelley pointed a dramatic, accusatory finger at him. You are not crying without me. Before Ryan could react, Shelley all but launched herself onto the couch beside him, grabbing onto Ryan's arm as if they were sinking on the same ship. And just like that, she started crying too. Dramatically. Ryan sniffled mid-laugh, shaking his head. Shelley, what the hell? Shelley scooped the tiny kitten's paw, bringing it to her tear-streaked face. Listen here, little guy, she sniffed. I love you. Ryan nodded firmly, petting the kitten's tiny head. I love you too, Shelley gasped, nodding faster. We both love you. The kitten gave a small, uncertain mew. Shelley wiped her nose dramatically. This is it, Ryan. We are officially parents now. Ryan let out a half-sob, half-laugh, shaking his head. Yeah, I guess we are. Next chapter. Ryan waited by the truck, hands in his pockets, watching as his parents packed up their things. His father muttered under his breath, slamming the trunk shut. These damn hotels are getting worse every year. Oh, it was fine, his mother countered, dismissing Frank's usual grumbling. She turned to Ryan then, eyes softening. Oh, honey, please stay safe. Before he could respond, she pulled him into a tight hug, the kind that lasted a little too long, like she was trying to make up for time she knew they wouldn't have later. I will, I'll be fine, Ryan assured her, but she still didn't let go right away. His father stepped up next, less sentimental but still present. He pulled Ryan close in a firm, one-handed hug. It was brief, but solid, the kind of embrace that wasn't just affection, but an unspoken expectation. See you in a couple months, Frank said, his voice low. Then, a little quieter, remember what I told you, okay? Yeah, Ryan said, nodding. And then they were gone. The truck rumbled to life, kicking up dust as they pulled onto the road. His mother gave one last wave from the passenger seat, while his father kept his eyes on the road ahead. Ryan watched them drive off until they disappeared around the bend. Then, he exhaled, shoulders sagging just a little. It was time to get back to reality. Next chapter. Ryan adjusted his gear, tightening the straps on his pack. The weight was familiar and grounding. Around him, the squad checked their weapons, murmuring to each other in low, focused voices. Daniel, ever the loud one, threw his arms up. All right, everyone. You ready to go down in the mines? Yeah. The other soldiers responded with a mix of cheers, whistles, and a few sarcastic groans. The energy was high, but beneath it, there was tension, the kind that came before stepping into the unknown. The steam train hissed, releasing a final burst of pressure as it slowed to a stop. The metal groaned under its own weight, the doors clanking open. Move out, someone barked. The unit fell into formation, boots hitting the ground in unison as they marched forward. No more joking now. The air grew thick, humid, unnatural, and ahead of them, the Goral mines loomed. The entrance was a dark, yawning void, swallowing the daylight. The jagged rock formations around it looked almost like teeth, waiting to devour anything that entered. A low, distant drip echoed from within, lost in the depths of whatever lay below. Ryan swallowed hard. No turning back now. One by one, the soldiers disappeared into the black. Next chapter. Ryan had been in combat zones before. They all followed the same rhythm. Long stretches of waiting, broken up by brief moments of chaos. Most of the time, it was just downtime. Soldiers pacing, playing cards, telling the same stories over and over. Then, a few sporadic shots in the distance, one side testing the other, seeing if anyone would take the bait. Then, more waiting. This was no different. 2 months in the mines and nothing. Ryan sat on the edge of his bunk, arms crossed. It's been 2 months, he muttered to Brian. Is this all we're going to do? Brian shrugged, stretching out his arms like he didn't have a care in the world. At least I can work out without the old lady nagging me, he said, laughing. Ryan was about to respond when suddenly the door burst open. A group of soldiers stormed in, grinning like they were on a mission. One of them pointed straight at Ryan. It's time. Ryan and Brian looked up, instantly alert. Time for what? From behind them, someone shouted, For the barber man. Ryan's stomach dropped. Oh, shit, Brian muttered. Haha, go get him, Miles, someone cackled. Then Miles appeared, holding an electric razor, grinning like a man with a vendetta. You know the regulations, Ryan, he said, wagging the razor like a scolding finger. Ryan bolted. A few soldiers ran after him, knocking over chairs, diving over tables. Laughter erupted as he dodged, weaving between bunks, nearly slipping on a loose shirt. But they were faster. 3 of them tackled him at once, pinning him down. Ryan squirmed. You bastards! Psst! The razor whirred to life. Say goodbye to your hair. The room exploded with laughter as the first chunk fell to the floor. Ryan groaned. He hated regulations. 2 weeks passed, and as always, the rotation of troops continued. Some were sent home for emergency leave, sick family members, urgent matters that required their presence. Others were injured, their service cut short by bad luck. One soldier was being shipped out after losing 3 fingers while trying to repair a malfunctioning machine. Some were lucky enough to leave for marriage, their deployments ending so they could return to a life outside the mines. But for every soldier who left, another replaced them. The new arrivals trickled in, adjusting to their surroundings, taking in the dim, stale air of the barracks. Among them, a fresh-faced young soldier walked with purpose into the veteran group's workspace. His posture was rigid, his uniform crisp. He was eager, determined. He stopped in front of them and snapped to attention. Grayson reporting for duty, he barked, saluting with 100% seriousness. The room went silent for a moment. Then Brian, halfway through assembling his rifle, looked up at the kid with an unimpressed expression. At ease, he waved a hand dismissively. You look raring to go. Grayson nodded sharply. Yes, sir, I am here to find Tattoo Face and his men. A howl of laughter erupted from the room. Grayson blinked, genuinely confused. A bored-looking soldier named Vincent strolled up, still chewing on a piece of jerky. You actually believe that shit? Grayson straightened his back as serious as ever. Yes, sir. More laughter. Ryan, who had been leaning against the wall, finally looked up. Next chapter. Ryan sat on his bunk, absently chewing on the end of his pen, staring at the blank page in front of him. How far should he lean into his persona? Dear Shelley, he frowned. Too formal, too distant. He crumpled the paper and tossed it aside. He started again. Hey, darling. Hope you're staying fabulous. Ryan smirked to himself. That'll do. It's dreadful down here in these awful mines. Nothing is happening. I'm so bored I'm just writing to tell you that. Stay amazing. He read it over. Perfect. Short, ridiculous, exactly how he wanted it. No need to say more. Just as he folded the paper, a group of soldiers burst into the barracks. Okay, troops. We've got some equipment out on the dock that needs to be disposed of. The room erupted in cheers. This was their entertainment, blowing things up, destroying whatever was marked for disposal. Trucks, tanks, old machinery, anything they were given clearance to obliterate. Ryan stood, stretching. But before he could take a step, Ian, the squad's resident skeptic, spoke up. Is this going to be perfectly good equipment again? The commanding officer didn't even hesitate. None of that kind of talk, get it? And with that, he walked out. A few soldiers laughed, already heading out to claim their favorite explosives. But Ian just sat down, rubbing his temple. Damn it! Ryan looked over, curious. What's the deal? Ian let out a bitter chuckle. Corruption! Another soldier flopped down on a nearby bunk. Come on, man. They say that stuff's too faulty for a war zone. Ian laughed again, shaking his head. Yeah, that's bullshit. Ryan tilted his head. So what's really going on? Ian leaned forward, eyes scanning the room as if someone might be listening. They destroy perfectly functioning vehicles and equipment on purpose. Ryan raised a brow. Why? Ian sighed. Because when we burn through our supply, we need replacements. And guess who gets rich? Ryan sat there for a second, processing. The manufacturers, the contractors, the ones at the top. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Ian looked at him knowingly. Not that hard to figure out, man. Ryan glanced down at the sealed letter in his hands. For a brief moment, he thought about opening it, thought about adding something else. But instead, he just placed it aside. Some things weren't worth writing down. Next chapter. Ryan lay sprawled on his top bunk, bored out of his skull, tossing a rubber ball at the side wall and catching it on the rebound. Over and over, each throw perfectly calculated. Across the room, Mendez lowered his magazine and watched. Good eye for balance, Towers. Ryan didn't reply, just flicked the ball at a sharper angle. It ricocheted twice, off the wall, off the ceiling, and landed neatly in Mendez's waiting hand. "Whoa," Mendez breathed, turning the ball over in his palm. "You did that without even looking." "I guess I have a talent for aim." A soldier a few feet away, hunched over a half-disassembled rifle, scoffed. "Not that you'll ever use it outside the range. We've been stuck here how long, and we haven't even seen a real firefight." Even the newbie Grayson seemed bored. Mendez let out a dry laugh. "The enemy's a scam, man. Look at this." He flipped open a battered notepad, pages full of scribbled dates. "A list of every time we've captured Tattoo Face's top commander." He tossed it to Grayson, who caught it reluctantly, skepticism already written all over his face. How many top commanders could he have? The soldier cleaning the gun shifted uncomfortably. "What are you saying? That it's all fake? You into that conspiracy shit now?" Ryan yawned and dropped down beside the small group, stretching once before glancing at the notepad. Mendez looked around the room, lowering his voice as he pulled out his tablet. "That's not all. Look at this," he said, almost in a whisper. The screen flickered to life, displaying a dimly lit site. Grainy logo, glitchy scroll bar. One of the soldiers snorted. "Ugh, that site. They're the ones who think birds aren't real and the water's laced with chemicals to make us more obedient." Grayson laughed, shaking his head. Ryan raised an eyebrow but leaned in anyway, mild curiosity stirring behind his quiet exterior. Mendez tapped the screen. Yeah, I know. But listen. The official story says Tattoo Face bombed 3 hospitals. That's what started all this. That's what made him a terrorist. That's why they sent us here." From across the barracks, Ian poked his head up from his bunk. "Hey, what are you guys looking at? Can I get in?" Mendez waved him over without missing a beat. Ian slid in beside them and glanced at the screen. "Oh yeah, I post on those threads all the time." The soldier cleaning his gun set it down slowly and gave them all a long look. "You guys are insane." Mendez clicked on a link and a grainy video filled the tablet screen. "Okay, here's that hospital he bombed." A shaky clip played, bombed out rubble, smoke rising, people screaming as they fled. "And here's the footage they released of Tattoo Face." A close-up flashed. A man walking from the flames, tattoos snaking across his face, laughing like it was all a joke. Then the clip cut again. A new image appeared. Another man, similar build, similar face, smiling on the set of some low-budget sci-fi drama. "This guy's an actor," Mendez said, tapping the screen. "He's been in a couple movies and some garbage network shows." The video split them side by side. Then the tattoos were digitally peeled away from the alleged terrorist's face. Beneath the ink, the resemblance sharpened. Grayson leaned closer and muttered, "A match." Ryan studied the screen, frowning. "They do look alike, but that's not proof," Mendez fast-forwarded. "Right, but look." The screen jumped to another segment. Some independent analyst, framed between posters of both men, pointing at their features like a conspiracy preacher. They ran it through an AI analyzer. 93% match. Ian spoke next, arms crossed, voice laced with skepticism. "That's not proof. Any sane person would think you're crazy." Mendez looked up from the tablet, brow raised. "Didn't you say you visited this site?" Ian sat down with a sigh. "Yeah, I do, but not for this." His voice dropped, the edge of sarcasm giving way to something darker. "The real reason they're doing this? Most people can't even begin to understand." Ryan turned toward him, curiosity cutting through the silence. "So what are we all missing?" Ian's expression shifted. No grin, no bravado, just a quiet certainty. "It's about control, taking our rights away." He paused, watching the others. "You remember what happened after those bombings? The Citizen Protection Act?" Ryan thought for a moment. After the attacks, things had changed. Digital scans just to enter buildings. A national ID card to prove who you were. Talk of curfews that almost passed. Surveillance bills that quietly slid through. They're using these events to justify it. Little by little, freedom becomes a privilege. Grayson tilted his head, confused. "Why would they want that?" Ian looked straight at him. "Use your imagination." The soldier at the bunk cleaning his gun let out a bark of laughter. "This is what happens when you've got too much downtime, fellas." The barracks door slammed open with enough force to silence half a dozen conversations mid-sentence. Their commanding officer, Lieutenant Keller, stepped inside, expression hard. His voice cut through the room like a blade. "Everyone on your feet. We've got an operation." Boots hit the floor. Conversations died. Even Ian sat up straight. Keller didn't wait. "There was an incident outside the Goral base 2 nights ago. Started as a drunken brawl. One Forgeborn, one Federation. Typical testosterone-fueled bullshit. It escalated." He paced once in front of them, stopping just shy of Ryan's bunk. A shot was fired. A Federation soldier is dead. The shooter, a Forge-born private, is in their custody. Federation Command is demanding we take him into ours. The Forge-born are refusing. They say it's their matter, their man, their trial. He looked around the room, eyes scanning each face. You've all seen what happens next. The media's already calling it murder. Our leadership is calling for revenge. The Forgeborn are doubling their patrols. No one wants to back down, but the fuse is lit. Keller turned toward the wall, pressing a button. A map flickered on the hollow screen. This morning, Command received a tip. Intel says a Forgeborn weapons cache has been moved to the Ridge sector. Normally, this wouldn't be our business, but higher-ups want a show of strength. We're being sent to investigate, make noise, apply pressure. This is all taking place in a small Forgeborn village called Drake. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Something in his gut twisted. Keller took a slow breath. You'll move in standard formation. Gear up. No warning shots unless fired upon. But if this turns into something bigger, you don't hesitate. You follow orders. He paused at the doorway, voice lowering. This situation's a powder keg, and you're the match. Then he was gone. Next chapter. The final minutes before the raid were filled with whispers, quiet tension, and conflicting orders. Soldiers moved in loose formations, checking gear, tightening straps. Some were silent, their focus razor-sharp. Others, too loud, too eager, their voices cutting through the night with nervous energy. Ryan had been in the field long enough to feel when something was wrong, and this felt wrong. He glanced around. Too many fresh faces, too many recruits who had just arrived 2 days ago. He nudged Brian. Why the hell are we using rookies for this? Brian exhaled through his nose, a humorless sound. Politics. Ryan narrowed his eyes. Meaning? Brian adjusted his rifle strap. Brass wants to look tough. They think a full-force raid sends a message. Ryan's stomach churned. To who? Brian's mouth twisted into something between a smirk and a grimace. Everyone. Then he added the part that made Ryan's skin crawl. And it's a free fire zone. Can you believe that shit? Ryan stopped breathing for a second. A what? You heard me, Brian said, voice low. Anything that moves? It's fair game. Before Ryan could fully process that, a voice cut through the chatter. A high-ranking officer stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. Listen up, he barked. The crowd quieted. There's been talk that this is a free fire zone. He let the words settle. Then his eyes hardened. That is not true. Murmurs spread. Some soldiers looked relieved. Others, pissed. The tension crackled between them, as if half the unit had already made up their minds before the first shot was fired. Ryan noticed something else too. In the back, some soldiers weren't even listening. They were grinning, whispering to each other, adjusting their weapons like the order didn't apply to them. Ryan felt a pit in his stomach. Then, another voice. A different officer, lower ranking but more dangerous, muttered just loud enough for Ryan to hear. You hear what's being said? Anything that moves. Ryan turned sharply. The officer winked and walked away. The high-ranking commander, the one who had tried to rein in the chaos, clenched his jaw. He knew this was going to go bad. He knew they weren't all listening, but the moment had passed. The mission was already set in motion. He exhaled, then barked the words, All right, troops, time to go. The second the order dropped, boots thundered forward, surging like a wave, crashing into the dark. Ryan moved with them, his chest tightening. The officer who had tried to stop it? He just threw up his hands. And then they entered Drake, and everything changed. Drake was silent when they entered. Not the kind of silence that came from peace, but the kind that came from waiting. Buildings stood dark. The glow of lanterns flickered behind shuttered windows. Ryan's squad moved in formation, boots crunching softly against the dirt road. The air hung heavy. A Forgeborn checkpoint stood ahead, a makeshift barricade, nothing more than sandbags and a couple of soldiers leaning against the wall, smoking. They weren't on alert. They weren't expecting this. Ryan's squad spread out, their weapons aimed but not firing. The Forgeborn guards froze, hands hovering near their weapons. One of them, a man barely older than Ryan, slowly raised his hands. Wait! He never got to finish. A sudden noise broke the moment. Footsteps, fast and unsteady. Ryan turned just in time to see someone running toward them. A figure moving fast from the side alley. Grayson panicked. Without thinking, without waiting, without checking, he fired. The gunshot split the night. The figure collapsed. Ryan's stomach dropped. The dust settled, revealing a man, unarmed, Older, gray-streaked beard, confusion frozen on his face. His hands were empty. A basket of food lay spilled on the ground beside him. The villagers saw it happen. A woman screamed. A Forge-born soldier reached for his rifle. The Federation opened fire. The Drake massacre had begun. The gunfire erupted in seconds. Federation soldiers fired at anything that moved. Villagers ran for cover, screaming. Forge-born soldiers scrambled to fight back, but were completely overwhelmed. Ryan froze, his hands gripping his weapon but not firing. This wasn't a raid. This was a slaughter. He turned to Grayson, but the rookie stood frozen, his face pale, staring at the body like he couldn't believe what he had done. But it didn't matter now, because the killing wouldn't stop. Chaos. It was turning into pure chaos. Ryan and two soldiers dove for cover behind a toppled cart, bullets tearing through the night. Screams filled the air, civilians running, soldiers shouting, gunfire cracking from all sides. The villagers weren't all running. Some, confused, rushed inside to grab old rifles and pistols, weapons that were decades out of date. Some ran out trying to form a defense. Some just tried to protect their families. It didn't matter. They were cut down easily. A few Federation soldiers screamed conflicting orders over the chaos. Free fire. Lay down fire. The commands blended together, turning into a deafening roar. Ryan turned his head just in time to see a Forge-born soldier burst from a group of civilians, firing wildly at Federation forces. Ian ducked behind cover next to Ryan, gripping his rifle. What the hell? Is that guy using them as cover? The Forge-born gunman moved fast, weaving between terrified civilians. A Federation soldier next to Ryan dropped, screaming, clutching his chest. Then another. Ryan had no choice. He opened fire. The Forge-born soldier collapsed, riddled with bullets. But so did two civilians standing near him. A woman, arms outstretched like she had been reaching for something. A male, his body crumpling to the dirt. Ryan's breath hitched. His stomach turned. A hand clapped his shoulder. "Thanks for the save, man." Ryan turned to see one of his squad mates grinning at him, like this was some training exercise that had gone well, not the civilian massacre that it was. Mendez stumbled into view, crashing into Ryan and Ian behind cover. "I think something got me," he gasped, eyes wide. "Something got me. Can you look?" Ian stayed in position, still firing bursts downrange. Ryan grabbed Mendez by the shoulders, pulling him closer. "Where?" Mendez's hands were shaking as he fumbled with his vest, finally yanking it off and lifting his shirt. There it was, a dark bloom of blood spreading across his side. "You've been hit," Ryan said, the words catching in his throat. Mendez's eyes fluttered, then rolled back as his knees gave out. He collapsed into Ryan's arms. "Medic!" Ryan shouted, voice cracking. Across the battlefield, a recruit with "Tattoo Face Will Pay" scrawled on his rifle was a storm of destruction. His weapon never stopped firing. He cut down anything that moved. A woman tried to run, he dropped her. A man crawled, wounded, he finished him. Ryan watched in horror as the recruit was so out of control he shot two Federation soldiers in the back. "Shit!" Ryan broke cover and sprinted across the field, tackling him. The recruit struggled, thrashing like a wild animal. "Get off of me." Ryan pinned him down, breathing heavy, his pulse slamming in his ears. Around them, Federation troops unleashed everything they had. Grenades, automatic fire, explosives tearing through homes. The village of Drake was no longer a battle. It was a massacre. Ryan stayed on top of the out-of-control soldier, forcing his weight down, keeping him pinned. The soldier thrashed beneath him, yelling, cursing, desperate to keep killing. "Get the hell off me. We're not done yet," Ryan yelled. "You're shooting your own troops." His ears rang from the endless gunfire, the sharp crack of rifles, the deep, thunderous roar of explosives. A plasma grenade detonated nearby, showering them with dirt and shrapnel. More Federation troops stormed through the village, their weapons pouring fire into anything that moved. Across the way, Ian was shooting at something, but his face was blank, like he wasn't even thinking anymore. Ryan's hands trembled as he loosened his grip on the soldier. And that's when a new voice tore through the madness. A deep, booming, almost unhinged voice. "Stand down! Stand the hell down now!" Ryan's head snapped toward the source. A high-ranking Federation officer stormed into the battlefield, his uniform soaked with sweat and dirt, his eyes wild with fury. Colonel Gabriel Nance. He was flanked by two military police officers, weapons drawn, faces stone cold. The gunfire had faded into a hollow, suffocating silence. Smoke curled from burning homes, the stench of plasma scorches and blood thick in the air. Then movement. A few ragged civilians stumbled from the wreckage, emerging from underground shelters, hidden cellars, from behind the ruins of homes that no longer existed. Their cries pierced the night, cutting sharper than any gunfire. Ryan stood frozen, his rifle hanging limp in his hands. And then he saw her, A woman sprinted across the field, her sobs raw, broken. She ran straight toward the bodies he had fired upon. The man at the center, it had to be her husband. She collapsed over him, wailing. A sound so deep, so human, it cracked something inside Ryan. At first, he thought she was just in shock, but then she looked at him. Her tear-streaked face lifted, wide, hollowed eyes locking onto his, and he knew. She recognized him, not with hatred, not with rage, but with a look that pleaded with him. A silent, desperate question. Wake me up. Tell me this isn't real. But Ryan couldn't. Then she started screaming, and then she did something unexpected. She framed Ryan's head between her thumb and index finger, her eyes narrowing as she studied the space he occupied, as if measuring something unseen. She whispered a word, then said it again, louder, over and over, a forge-born word, one Ryan didn't understand. But she never broke eye contact. Behind him, someone spoke. Bradley, he thought the name was. A quiet soldier with ties to the forge-born. Ryan remembered hearing that his family had mixed heritage. Bradley's voice was low, serious. You must be her angel, bud. Ryan didn't look at him. His eyes stayed locked on the woman, his expression empty, his voice barely above a whisper. What's she saying? That hand gesture, it's a sign of hope. And the word she's using? That's angel. Not sure why she's giving it to you, though. Angel, angel, angel. Her screams never stopped. And Ryan didn't move, because he finally understood that there was no waking up from this. A voice cut through the silence. Pack it up, soldiers. Mission time, 2:01 a.m. Next chapter. The fallout was worse than anyone expected. The massacre at Drake made front-page news across the entire Federation. Every headline became a battlefield of its own. One side called it a war crime. The Federation commits slaughter in peaceful village. 200 dead, including women and children. Where's the justice? This was no accident. This was extermination. The other side called it the fog of war. Tragic misunderstanding in a war zone. Federation troops caught in an unavoidable conflict. Split-second decisions under fire. Who's really to blame? The government scrambled to keep the peace. They held a trial. All soldiers were pardoned. A few scapegoats were sentenced to a few months in the brig. Officially, the Federation moved on. But in the barracks, in underground circles, in the whispers passed between soldiers on both sides, a legend was being born. The Angel of Drake. No one knew where it started. Maybe it was a drunk soldier trying to sound tough. Maybe it was one of the Forgeborn, twisting the massacre into a rallying cry. But the stories spread fast. One tale said, there was one soldier, one man, who went crazy in the middle of the battle. While everyone else hesitated, he killed over 100 people himself. Another claimed, he didn't even use his rifle. They say, the Angel of Drake threw down his firearms and pulled out 2 huge knives, tearing through civilians like fury unleashed. Some soldiers laughed about it. Yeah, I heard he was 7 feet tall. I heard he took out a whole family with his bare hands. Others whispered it in fear. I heard he never blinked, that he was smiling the whole time. They say he was unstoppable, that he just wouldn't stop. The story was completely out of control. Every soldier had a different version. Every recruit heard a different nightmare, and nobody knew the truth. Next chapter. Ryan returned home, but home didn't feel real anymore. The war had followed him. It lingered in every shadow, in the silence between conversations, in the way people looked at him without really looking at him. He wasn't Ryan Towers anymore. He wasn't anything. His father greeted him with a handshake, firm and unwavering, a gesture performed more out of habit than love. You did your job, son, he said. Ryan didn't answer. What was there to say? Did his father know? Had he seen the headlines? Heard the whispers? The stories of the Angel of Drake? Or did he just see what he wanted to see? The soldier, the man, the ideal son molded in his own image. Either way, it didn't matter. Ryan no longer cared. Not about approval, not about duty, not about being tough or right or brave. He had seen where that road led. He had walked through its fire. He had watched it devour everything, and he was done. Upstairs in his room, the old music box played softly on the dresser. His mother's favorite tune drifted into the air like a ghost trying to comfort him. But home didn't feel like home anymore. He sat still, breath catching, remembering the woman in Drake. The way she had run toward the bodies. The way she had looked at him. Her face stained with tears. Her voice rising in that haunting cry. Angel, angel, angel. She had framed his head with her fingers like she was measuring something sacred. whispering hope into the space where he stood. It didn't make sense. Not then, not now, because all he had felt since returning was despair, the opposite of hope. And yet, he turned toward the mirror. "Hope," he whispered. Slowly, he reached under his bed and pulled out a small duffel bag, unzipped it with deliberate fingers. Inside, tucked away from the world, was an auburn wig, soft and beautiful. He ran his hands through the strands, then placed it gently on his head. He looked into the mirror, and there she was, a slow, steady breath. Hope. He moved to the closet and pulled down another hidden bag, buried where he knew his parents would never find it. Inside was his favorite dress, folded neatly, waiting for this moment. He put it on, looked again. Not Ryan, not the angel of Drake, just Eliza Brightwell. One last touch. The sunglasses, large, elegant, familiar, he slipped them on. Then came the quiet smile. "Introduce yourself to them, darling." Her voice now. Not his. Not borrowed. Not disguised. Her own. She descended the stairs, heels silent against the carpet. Her parents were in the living room, mid-conversation. They looked up. The moment froze. Her father's coffee mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Her mother took a step back, hands covering her mouth. "I have been waiting so long to introduce you to Eliza Brightwell." Next chapter, 7 years later. Eliza stepped into the office of Admiral Trenholm. The man looked different today, refreshed, crisp, exuding a calm authority. His uniform was immaculate, his demeanor welcoming. A friendly smile played on his lips as he gestured toward the chair across from his imposing desk. "Come, sit down," he said. Eliza hesitated for a fraction of a second before settling into the seat, her posture rigid. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. "I have some questions," she began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Trenholm leaned back, fingers steepled, studying her with a measured gaze. "Go right ahead, Ryan." Eliza froze. That name. Her mind spun, pulse pounding in her ears. This could go one of two ways. She swallowed hard. Stay calm. Play it smart. The Admiral's expression remained unreadable. Waiting. Watching. Testing. Eliza took a slow breath, steeling herself. "Let the game begin." "Guilty as charged," she said, raising her hands in mock surrender. Her voice was light, almost playful, but her pulse thundered in her chest. "So," she added, "what else do you know?" Admiral Trenholm didn't answer right away. Instead, he selected a thick cigar from a polished case, rolling it between his fingers before lighting it with practiced ease. Smoke coiled through the air, rich and heavy, curling upward toward the ceiling vent. The ashtray in front of him read, "No smoking," in bold, ironic letters. Eliza crossed her legs, watching him. He was dragging it out. Setting the stage. Fine, she thought. Let's play. Trenholm finally spoke, voice calm and almost amused. "Ryan Towers." Her stomach tightened. He peered at her over his glasses. God, she hated that. The calculated dominance of it. "Second in his class," he continued, flipping slowly through a manila folder. "Blackridge, Oran's Divide, Dusk Front Conflict." He placed the folder down with a quiet thud, tapping his finger on the final entry. "Drake." Eliza's gaze stayed fixed on the folder. Her face didn't flinch. Not a flicker. She felt his eyes on her, searching, hungry for a crack in her armor. Instead, she raised a brow and leaned back, casual, calculated. "Well," she said with a dry smirk, "I guess you do know some things." Trenholm exhaled a slow stream of cigar smoke, shaking his head with a crooked smirk. "Of all the people Ashmore sends me," he muttered, half amused, half exasperated. "It's the goddamn angel of Drake." Eliza didn't flinch. She knew the weight that name carried. Trenholm leaned forward, elbows resting on his immaculate desk. "No wonder you put the swords to Nix's throat. You really are a goddamn loose cannon." His eyes searched her, for remorse, pride, hesitation. She gave him nothing. Silence stretched. He chuckled, low and bitter. "The angel of Drake," he repeated, reaching for a decanter of dark amber liquor. He poured 2 glasses, the soft clink of crystal punctuating the moment. Sliding one toward her, he lifted his own and swirled it slowly. "Care for a drink?" Eliza eyed the glass but didn't move. She wasn't sure if it was a peace offering or just another move in his performance. Trenholm took a sip, watching her over the rim. "Tell me, Ryan," he said quietly. "How did it feel when it was over? I always wondered, reading the reports, hearing the legends." He leaned back, the smirk finding its way home again. The air grew thick, close. The room pressed in. Eliza's fingers wrapped around the untouched glass, steady. She lifted her gaze to meet his, lips curling into a smile so thin it was nearly invisible. It was what it was. Eliza narrowed her eyes. If you and Ashmore are really working together, I need confirmation. You understand, of course." She pulled out her communicator, fingers flying over the keypad. There were only a handful of people who could verify this. The room went still. Only the faint hum of the device filled the silence. Trenholm remained unbothered, watching her like a man who already knew the ending to the story. Then the response lit up the screen. "Halstead. It's legit." Eliza stared at the message. Her grip on the device tightened. Slowly, she raised her head and met Trenholm's gaze. "So you and Ashmore are working together?" He didn't blink. His voice was steady. "Yes." Her thoughts raced. The secrecy, the reach of their influence, the control they'd wielded from the shadows for years. "You've been in contact with Sky's homeworld for decades." "Yes." She inhaled, slow, controlled. "You have advanced weapons, ones that could change the war overnight." "Yes." The silence that followed was heavy. "Final." Eliza's hand curled into a fist on the desk. There was one more question, the one that mattered most. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. "You know what I have to do to Snow." Trenholm didn't move, didn't blink. "Yes." Eliza shifted in her chair, fingers tightening against the armrests. Something in her gut whispered that whatever came next, she wouldn't like it. Trenholm noticed. A knowing look crept across his face, like a man savoring a moment he'd been waiting years to unfold. "I love when people wake up to the truth," he said, voice smooth, almost indulgent. "It makes the world feel so much more filling, more alive." Eliza didn't move, didn't speak. Trenholm turned to his terminal, fingers dancing across the keys with practiced ease. The screen behind him flickered to life. A photograph appeared. Eliza leaned in slightly, her breath catching. It was Trenholm, years younger, but unmistakable, standing beside another man. They were hugging, smiling. The kind of smile old friends wear when they think no one's watching. Her stomach twisted. "Colonel Vance Aldrich," she whispered. "The Dominion's top authority." Trenholm's grin widened. "A great golfer," he said casually, as if that were the important part. "Decent actor, too, whenever we have to put on a bit of theater." He let out a wistful sigh. "Sometimes he almost makes me break character." Eliza's eyes snapped to his. Trenholm tapped his temple with 2 fingers, chuckling softly. "I think we've got a game next week, actually." Eliza clenched her fist. Her world wasn't just shifting, it was peeling back, revealing something rotten underneath. And maybe it had always been that way. She didn't know what to do with that. Eliza's mind was racing, thoughts colliding faster than she could catch them. But outwardly she didn't flinch. Her face stayed locked in place. "Why?" she asked, voice sharper now. "Why would you be working together? The cause, the fractures, the machine, none of this makes sense." Trenholm let out a deep, indulgent chuckle as he leaned back in his chair. Now, he said, raising a hand like he was guiding a child back to safety. "Let's rewind a bit, one piece at a time." He watched her, measured. Then just for a moment his tone softened. "I have faith in you, Eliza. I told you," he continued, the smirk returning. "I had my eyes on you from the start. You did better than I ever expected." Eliza didn't respond. "And you and that blindfolded weirdo?" He let out a low laugh. "You two could probably seal the next fracture blindfolded and barefoot the way you're going. Resourceful, cunning, the best I've seen." He gestured broadly, dismissively. "Our current soldiers? Let's just say they're not exactly the best and brightest." He laughed again, an easy, cruel sound. Eliza narrowed her eyes. "What is this?" she thought. The room felt smaller now. The walls seemed to press inward, subtly, silently, like a trap slowly closing. Trenholm struck a match. The flickering light carved sharp shadows across his face as he lit another cigar, inhaled deeply, then exhaled a slow, curling stream of smoke into the already heavy air. He reached for his glass, downed another mouthful of amber liquor, and let the burn settle before placing it on the desk with a deliberate clink. "The circle needs new blood," he said casually. "New soldiers for the cause. Most of us are getting old, tired. We need replacements." He leaned toward the console and tapped a few keys. "Here, let me show you the president we see." Eliza raised an eyebrow. President Carson, the figurehead of the fractured steam world government. The monitor lit up. A shaky video played. President Carson being gently guided by aides. Confused, shuffling, someone handed off what looked like a diaper bag. "There," Trenholm said, chuckling. "Can't even hold his own diaper bag. Doesn't know where he is. And this guy's running what's left of the world." He laughed hard and uncontrollably. A man unbothered by decay. In fact, entertained by it. "But goddammit," he said, calming. "If I don't love finding talent, waking them up, His eyes locked on hers, steady and sharp. "There aren't many like us, Eliza," he continued. "People who see things as they are. People who understand that the world isn't black and white. It's a goddamn chessboard. And most of the pieces don't even know they're being moved." He took another long drag, the ember glowing like a slow-burning fuse. "People like you, me, and the circle?" He gestured vaguely, like naming an ancient secret. "We stick together." Eliza's heart sank. Trenholm leaned forward, elbows on the desk, his tone dipping into something almost reverent. "We make the hard choices others can't." Trenholm tapped the ash off his cigar, watching the glowing embers fall and sizzle against the edge of the ashtray. His expression was calm, almost amused, like a teacher explaining a child's game to someone just beginning to grasp the rules. "First off, the cause," he began, swirling the liquor in his glass before taking another slow sip. "We can sway public opinion any way we like. The zombies out there?" He waved a hand dismissively. "They'll believe anything coming from a suit and tie. Add a pair of military fatigues, and they swallow it like gospel." Eliza's stomach turned. She knew how easily people could be led. She just wasn't sure she wanted to hear it laid out like this. Trenholm exhaled a slow stream of smoke, thoughtful. "It's not easy bending the truth," he said. "It takes work, timing, even sacrifice." He sighed, dramatic, indulgent. "But it works." Then his eyes slid back to her, expression unreadable. "Even if it means sending soldiers out to die." Eliza stiffened. Trenholm caught it, smirked. "Ah, that one stings, doesn't it?" She didn't respond. He pressed on. "Next up, religious leaders," he chuckled softly. "Now those? They'll say whatever they're told. If the prophet tells her followers to fight for the cause, most will do it without hesitation." Eliza's eyes snapped to him, sharper now. "The prophet?" Trenholm's grin widened. He took another long drag, letting the moment stretch as the ember glowed. Then he exhaled, smoke curling lazily between them like a secret he wanted to be discovered. "Oh, Eliza," he murmured, voice low and almost tender, "you really have no idea how deep this goes, do you?" Trenholm shifted in his chair, the smirk on his face widening, like a man sitting on the punchline of a joke only he understood. "The prophet," he mused, drawing out the title like a fine wine. "Our very own Dr. Cassandra Etherlight, leader of millions." He tapped a few keys and the view screen behind him flickered to life. Eliza turned toward it. There she was, Dr. Cassandra Etherlight, standing tall before a vast sea of kneeling followers. Her arms stretched wide, hands open like some divine conduit, as her voice rang out, calm and commanding, "Join the service you feel most comfortable with. Bring order back to the realm. Restore peace. Heal the fractures." The camera panned, a forest of bowed heads, a sea of worshippers lost in reverence. It felt more like a mass awakening than a rally. Eliza's throat tightened. Trenholm didn't even look at the screen. He scrolled through his communicator instead, expression idle, amused, as if he were thumbing through a photo album looking for a punchline. Eliza looked away from the screen. "The team visited her." Still scrolling, Trenholm replied, "Yeah, she told us." Something about the way he said it made her stomach twist. Then his face brightened. "Ah, here it is." He tapped the console. The screen changed. "Let's see our good prophet for who she really is." The video began. Eliza leaned in. Gone was the divine setting. This was no sermon. It was a party. A decadent, high society gathering, crystal glasses clinking, chandeliers glowing, people laughing in silk and shadow. And in the middle of it all was Dr. Cassandra Etherlight. With an undergarment wrapped around her head and a glass dangling from her hand, she swayed in place, barely upright. "My next prophecy," she slurred, "is that I'm having 2 more strong drinks." Laughter exploded around her. Someone clapped her on the back as she reached for her glass, missed entirely, and toppled backward into a velvet chair, legs in the air. Around her, cheers and applause erupted. Eliza blinked. "What?" Trenholm leaned back, savoring her reaction like a man unwrapping a long-planned gift. "The great prophet," he said, lifting his glass in mock salute. Eliza exhaled slowly and rubbed her temple. "The fractures, the war, the blind devotion of millions, the sermons, the symbols, the bowed heads. And this was the woman they believed in? You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. Trenholm chuckled, swirling his drink. "Oh, Eliza," he said with a grin, "I'd never joke about things like this." Trenholm exhaled a long, curling stream of cigar smoke, his smirk returning as he leaned back in his chair. "Next up," he said casually, almost amused, "could we win this war in a day? Of course." he chuckled, shaking his head. What you saw in the lab, those two brilliant nincompoops, he waved a hand dismissively. They could turn a goddamn stove into a cannon. Eliza stayed silent, watching and listening. Then his expression shifted. The amusement drained from his eyes, replaced by something colder. He straightened, posture tightening. His voice cooled. The real business at the heart of all this. He paused. Then his gaze locked onto hers. Wealth, prestige, and power. His fingers danced across the keyboard. The view screen flared to life. Rows of names filled the display. Corporations, conglomerates, defense contractors, energy titans. Tech firms, some Eliza recognized. Others sent a chill down her spine. We take things like soul energy, Trenholm said, or any other breakthrough, and we share them carefully among our private network of government contractors. He tapped the screen. The taxpayers flip the bill and the circle gets richer. Another keystroke. The screen changed again. This time, a graph. Names instead of logos. Individuals now. Stock values. Profit margins. Trenholm smirked. Some of us keep a little scoreboard. Just a friendly competition. He swirled his drink, the clinking of ice almost mocking. It all comes down to your broker, he added lightly. If they're worth their salt? Another screen. Weapon schematics. Long-range missiles. Pulse rifles. Fleet-grade artillery. The good taxpayers, he repeated, pay for weapons we shelve until we decide it's time to call them up. Eliza stared, the weight of it pressing down like ice water. If there's an enemy, she said quietly. Trenholm turned toward her, exhaling a breath of smoke. Then came the smile. And if there isn't? He tapped the desk, gesturing toward a framed newspaper on the wall. Eliza followed his gaze. Bold black letters screamed from behind the glass. War. The subheading, the Federation versus the Dominion. Her pulse hitched. Every soldier, every mission, every loss. It wasn't a war, but a business model. Trenholm exhaled slowly, tapping ash from his cigar before setting it aside. His expression was unreadable, but beneath the surface something shifted. Something darker. Some in the group, he said, voice slower now, look beyond wealth and power. Bigger goals. A flicker of amusement touched his lip. World changers, reshaping entire societies, visionaries. He let the word hang, suspended like smoke. Then he shook his head with a faint snort. Dreamers. A pause. Then his tone shifted. Just slightly, just enough. Some. Into nasty occult things I don't want to be a part of. His gaze flicked away, distant, as if recalling something he'd rather leave buried, something he'd seen firsthand. Then he forced the smirk back onto his face. But here we are, he said, spreading his hands. In the business of war. He turned to the console and tapped a few keys. The view screen flared to life, and Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. The spider. Massive, mechanical, a weapon, a nightmare, a profit machine. Trenholm leaned back, eyes on the screen. Made us billions. Then the footage began. Cities burning. People on fire, fleeing from crumbling towers. Children screaming. Bodies in the street. And then worse. A shelter. Collapsed. Charred cages. Doors twisted and melted. Eliza didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Civilians moved through the wreckage, arms full of whatever they could save. A rescuer held a burned dog, whispering softly as it whimpered in his arms. Others carried rabbits, birds, a cat missing half its fur. Then a woman, sobbing as a firefighter placed the singed, barely breathing cat into her arms. She cradled it like a child, rocked it, whispered over and over, "You're alive! You're alive!" Behind her, the fire still burned. Trenholm frowned. "Damn it! Where's the pause button on this thing?" He fumbled with the remote, annoyed. The footage kept playing behind him. Eliza looked down. Her hands had curled into fists. Eliza had learned a long time ago how to hold herself together when the world fell apart. It wasn't instinct. It was discipline honed over years, sharpened by necessity. Being good at poker helped too. But nothing forced her to reassemble her composure faster than one thing. She lifted her gaze, voice steady as steel. The fractures. The word cut through the air like a blade. Trenholm, still fumbling with the remote, finally managed to kill the footage. The screen went black, but the images remained, burned into Eliza's mind like scars. He turned toward her, brows raised in mock interest. "Ah, now we're getting somewhere." Eliza sat up straighter in her chair, her breath even, her thoughts snapping back into line. The fractures, the real reason she was here, the thread everything was tangled around. She folded her hands on the table, no trace of the storm within. "Tell me," she said, cold and controlled. Trenholm smiled, and Eliza knew this was what he had been waiting for all along. He sighed, rubbing his temple with 2 fingers before flicking his cigar through the air like a man wearied by his own brilliance. "This whole thing," he muttered, "is really starting to turn into a goddamn circus." He exhaled a ribbon of smoke, then leaned forward, tone laced with dry amusement. "A man in green handing that blindfolded girl a key," he scoffed. "I don't even know who cooked that crap up. The occult weirdos again doing their spooky little rituals." The view screen flickered to life. An image appeared. A man, cloaked in green, stood beside Madame Ashmore caught mid-conversation. Symbolic, strange, absurd. Trenholm chuckled, shaking his head. He looked like a goddamn grasshopper. Eliza didn't blink, didn't move, but her thoughts moved like lightning. Trenholm took another sip of his drink and set the glass down with a satisfied clink. "Anyway," he continued, waving off the absurdity, "when we need your team to jump to the next fracture, we just activate the key remotely." Eliza's grip tightened on the armrest. Trenholm smirked. "And like clockwork, the blindfolded girl is drawn straight to it." His eyes glinted. "Don't ask me to explain what's behind that trick." He leaned back, stretching. "I guess that's just what happens after years of studying her." Eliza clenched her jaw. Trenholm gave a lazy shrug, as if none of it mattered. "She eats up that prophecy crap, so does the team." Eliza didn't smile. Eliza kept her breathing steady, her posture relaxed. "But the assassination," she said carefully. "Snow." Trenholm nodded, as if it were just another line item in a long agenda. "Ah, yes," he exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. "We've already gathered the data we need from her. The same energy she uses to seal the fractures." He tapped a few keys. The view screen flared to life, displaying layered streams of data, energy readings, containment models, projections spanning the next decade. "We estimate we'll be able to engineer it ourselves within 2 years. Eliza's eyes flicked across the numbers. No reaction. Trenholm went on, voice calm and matter-of-fact. "We couldn't wait. We needed this charade to start now, not 2 years from now." His fingers drummed idly against the desk. "Your job," he said, "is still to be carried out." Eliza nodded slightly. No hesitation. No agreement. Just a nod. Trenholm smirked. "Loose ends." She met his gaze. Unreadable. And then again that small, slow nod. She played along. For now. Trenholm stretched, exhaling like a man wrapping up a pleasant meeting. "Well then, if there are no other questions, I think we're done here." Eliza didn't move. He smiled, slow and satisfied. "This could be a fantastic first step for you, Eliza." He let the words settle, then leaned forward, elbows on the desk, eyes sharp. "If you play your cards right, this could mean a life of chess instead of checkers." He gestured at the view screen, now flashing images of beachside property, exotic cars, shining towers. "Wealth, power, and prestige beyond your wildest dreams." Eliza remained still. Trenholm studied her, his smirk widening. "The psych profile on you," he said. "It's got the mind shrinkers chewing their pencils in half." He chuckled. "They don't know what to make of you." He raised his glass, tilted it in her direction, then took a slow sip. "What could persuade you, Eliza?" he asked softly. "Money? Authority? Control?" He set the glass down with a quiet clink. "It's all yours if you stay the course. I know the type. I helped build the circle. I can spot one of us a mile away." Then, with absolute certainty, "Do whatever you want," Trenholm said, his voice cool. "Just make certain the team causes as much damage as possible when you're called to the remaining fractures." He waved a hand, careless. "I don't care what's destroyed, hospitals, high-rises, anything." His smirk turned razor sharp. "You have my full backing." Eliza gave the smallest nod, her face unreadable. Trenholm exhaled, settling back once more, watching her like a collector admiring a rare find. Then he smiled. "We're the same, you and I." His voice was calm, assured, and final. "Never forget that." Eliza stood. No flourish, no reply, just a clean shift in posture, quiet and deliberate. She turned toward the door, didn't look back. But as she walked away, she heard him chuckle like a man who knew his poker hand was a winner. Next chapter. Eliza sat in the dim light of her quarters, the soft hum of a tiny music box filling the stillness. It was one of the few things she'd brought back with her, a relic from a past she'd spent years trying not to remember, a past that now felt like it belonged to someone else. The melody drifted through the air, slow and delicate. Her mother's. She had never known the name of the song. Maybe it didn't have one. Maybe it had belonged only to them, passed from mother to daughter in the quiet moments between battles neither had chosen. She let the notes fill the room, small, fragile things, as if the sound alone could keep everything else at bay. Eliza closed her eyes. Just for a moment she was a child again, small enough to sit cross-legged on the floor while her mother hummed along, fingers busy with some old repair, stitching a worn-out uniform, adjusting the straps on a gear pack. Always moving, always fixing. You don't throw something away just because it's broken, her mother had said once, voice steady, hands never still. You find out if it can be mended. Eliza exhaled, pressing her thumb against her temple. How long had it been since she'd even thought of that? She wasn't a child anymore. She wasn't even the same woman who had walked into Trenholm's office hours ago. Something had shifted, and some things couldn't be mended. Her fingers drifted over the music box, tracing the worn edges, the tiny imperfections smoothed by time and use. She had decisions to make. She'd known the meeting would be ugly, but this was something else entirely. The melody played on, but it wasn't enough to drown out the thoughts hammering behind her eyes. What would she tell the team? If she gave them everything, it could break them. Some would walk away. Some wouldn't believe her. And some might listen too closely, might see too much. Could she risk that? Could she risk not telling them? Her mind sifted through it all, carefully, deliberately. Not like chess. Chess was too clean. This was the weave, and she would decide how the threads pulled tight. The music played on, faint now, fading into the quiet. But Eliza had already stopped listening. She opened her eyes, steady now. She stood, smoothing the front of her jacket with one practiced motion. The melody still played as she stepped toward the door. Next chapter. There was a knock at Ezekiel's door. He opened it to find Eliza standing there, still in her jacket, face unreadable. "Hey," he said, stepping aside. "Come on in." "Thanks," she replied quietly, making her way to the couch. She sat down, pausing as if searching for the right words. "It's good to see you back," she added after a moment. Zeke eased onto the sofa across from her. She noticed he hadn't shaved in a couple days. A half-empty whiskey bottle sat on the table beside him, one glass already in use. "Yeah," he said, scratching the side of his head, voice gravelly. "Family business is always rough." He let out a short sigh. "I heard you kicked some ass while I was gone. Something about a gravity bomb?" Eliza allowed a faint smile. "We managed," she said, but the lightness didn't linger. Her tone shifted, softened. Talking with Sky or Abby was easy. Zeke was another matter. With him, things had to be measured, chosen. She drew a breath and decided not to dance around it. "Trenholm isn't what you think," she said. "I just got out of a meeting with him. Corruption is putting it mildly." Zeke's expression didn't change much. He just reached for his glass and took a slow sip, eyes steady. "Corruption's part of this, Eliza. You've been in the service. You've heard your share of the shit that goes on behind the scenes." "Yes," she said, her voice firmer now. "But this is different." She looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't ready for this. Not tonight. The weariness in his posture, the drink, the silence between his words, it all told her enough. She let the moment pass. "I'll explain everything to the team tomorrow," she said. 12 p.m. She stood. "I'm giving command of the team back to you." Zeke stretched his arms with a grunt. "I'll be there." Eliza walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. She turned slightly. "You look like you've been through a lot. If you need someone to talk to—" "I don't," Zeke said, cutting her off gently but firmly. "But thank you." She gave a small nod and left without another word. Next chapter. The team was assembled once more. Zeke sat near Silas, looking better than he had the day before, cleaner around the edges, steadier in his voice. The room was full now. Familiar faces, worn and weathered, gathered under low light. No one spoke loudly. They were waiting. When Eliza stepped through the door, the hum of quiet conversation faded. Every head turned. Zeke leaned back in his chair, arms folded, saying nothing. Just watching. Eliza took a slow breath, steadying herself from the inside out. "Things have gotten bigger," she said, her voice level. "Bigger than I can handle alone." "The team is back under Zeke's command," she said. "Effective immediately." A few looked to each other. Not in protest, just recognition. Something was changing. Eliza continued. "The Admiral doesn't seem to care what we do anymore," she said more quietly now. "I was given access to files that—" Her breath caught. She hesitated. Her eyes lifted, unfocused. Her wrist pressed against her brow. "I can't." The words slipped out, not defeated, just bare. She closed her lips, trying to hold back the swell rising beneath her ribs. It climbed anyway. Snow tilted her head slightly, watching without judgment. The room didn't move. No one knew what to say. Then Abby stepped forward. No words, just a hand on Eliza's arm, steady, warm, and present. One by one, the others followed. No questions, no pressure, just presence. They gathered around her, not as soldiers, not as friends, but something deeper. Next chapter. An hour had passed since Eliza told them everything. Every detail of her meeting with Trenholm. Every line of corruption. Every calculated manipulation. And finally, every word of her hidden orders. The mission to assassinate Snow before the final fracture. She had said it all. No armor, no deflection. Then she stepped out. Alone. The others stayed behind, gathered in the quiet. No shouting or accusations. Just the weight of it, passing between them like a shared flame. Zeke had said it would come down to a vote. And when the silence passed, they all agreed. She stays. But it wasn't unanimous until one voice broke the stillness. Snow's. I want her to remain, she said softly. And that was enough. Zeke stepped into the hall and found Eliza waiting. Seated, arms folded, face unreadable. You're still one of us, he said, a rare smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. Behind him, the others began to clap, soft at first, then stronger, a quiet kind of thunder. Eliza stood, looking around the room. No masks, no orders, no rank, just people who knew everything and still chose to stand with her. She gave a slow, dramatic bow, then grinned. You love me, she said, eyes glinting. You all love me. You won't regret it, darlings. And somehow, despite everything, laughter returned to the room. Next chapter. Dr. Elias Greaves sat hunched at his cluttered workbench, the warm glow of brass lamps casting long shadows across the scattered gears, sketches, and tools. Before him stood his latest creation, a miniature clockwork tower, delicate and precise, an echo of the grand machines that once turned empires. He held a magnifying glass to the contraption, peering deep into its interlocked gears, his gaze halting on a flaw barely 2 centimeters off. Oh, drat, he muttered, setting the lens aside with a sigh and rubbing his temple. How could I have missed it? The flaw was infinitesimal, yet fatal. He'd have to disassemble the entire mechanism, 2 weeks of work unraveled. He tapped his fingers against the desk in quiet exasperation. How dreadful. His eyes lingered on the gear, its imperfections silent and damning. How fitting, he mused aloud, leaning back and staring into the shadows above. Hazel stepped inside an hour later, the brass key turning smoothly in the door. The familiar scent of oil, old books, and polished brass greeted her like a ritual. Everything, as always, was in its place. Immaculate. Perfect. She sighed, stretching with mock weariness. What am I even going to clean? Wandering toward the tall mirror in the corner, she caught her reflection and paused. Then pose, a dramatic, exaggerated stance. Then another, and another. Her red hair framed her face in soft waves, cheeks flushed from the chill outside. Why are you still single? She asked her reflection, wagging a finger. You need to start looking soon. She rolled her eyes and laughed, telling her reflection to shut up. Her gaze drifted across the pristine lab. Everything was neat, meticulous, everything except her. Then she noticed the tower on the counter, its brass gleaming, gears frozen mid-thought. She approached, brushing her finger gently along its polished surface. I wish I had this kind of patience, she whispered. Good Lord. She smiled at the craftsmanship, unaware that, deep within the machine's heart, something unseen had begun to stir. And in the stillness, faint and fleeting, came a soft, mechanical chirp. Next chapter. Dr. Elias Greaves and Miss Connie Myers stood at the door to the lab, the evening's warmth still lingering between them. I thank you very much for the evening, Miss Myers. She extended her hand. With practiced elegance, he kissed it. The pleasure was all mine, Miss Myers replied, her voice carrying a delighted giggle. Then, a playful voice called out from over Elias's shoulder. Are you going to invite her in or what? Dr. Greaves stiffened. He turned slowly, already bracing himself. Standing in the doorway, arms folded, smirking, was his granddaughter, Hazel. Miss Connie let out a soft chuckle. Ah, my dear Hazel, I do believe we've met. Hazel leaned against the doorframe, grinning. Yep. Hey, Miss Myers. Connie smiled warmly. Ah, yes, such a sweet young lady. I do hope you give her my best. She straightened her coat. I really must be going. Dr. Greaves nodded, still clearly flustered. Of course, ma'am. Miss Connie gave him one last knowing glance before disappearing into the evening mist. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Inside the lab, Hazel had fully taken over the sitting area. The coffee table was covered in an assortment of snacks, half-eaten crackers, a jar of peanut butter, a plate of cheese, and an open bag of chips crammed between two stacks of books. On the view screen, some loud, dramatic adventure series was playing, casting flickering lights across the room. Hazel, legs kicked up over the arm of the chair, casually popped another cracker into her mouth. Cleaning was done. Dr. Greaves eyed the crumbs with a look of silent horror. You know, if you asked her to marry you, she would say yes. Dr. Elias Greaves sighed, his smile tired but patient, like a man who had endured this conversation countless times. Thank you for your advice, Hazel. I will remember that. Hazel smirked. Just trying to help. Elias nodded, amused. And I appreciate your help with keeping this place spotless. It really is a handful. And it was. A massive 3-story structure filled with intricate machinery, half-finished projects, and old books stacked so high they could topple at any moment. A few university students visited weekly for apprenticeships, but none had Hazel's sharp eye for order. Hazel stretched, grabbing her jacket. Everything was good. A few candy wrappers in the sofa cushions. Elias visibly winced. Any stains? Not that I could see. His relief was almost comical. Hazel grinned, cleaning up her own mess. Okay, Grandpa, see you in 3 days. She hugged him, a quick, familiar embrace. Then she turned toward the door. As Hazel reached for the doorknob, she hesitated. A flicker of something crossed her face. Then she turned back. Oh, and one more thing. Dr. Greaves raised an eyebrow. Yes? She hesitated for just a second. Then there was this strange noise, like a chirping sound. Elias froze. His fingers, which had been adjusting his cuff, stopped mid-motion. Hazel tilted her head. It was faint. I almost thought I imagined it. But I heard it. Near the workbench, I think. For a moment, her grandfather didn't respond. Then his voice was carefully neutral. Describe it. Hazel frowned, thinking. It wasn't mechanical. Or, I don't think it was. It was small, quick, like... She snapped her fingers. Like that. Just one, and then nothing. Dr. Greaves stared at her for a long moment. Then, with unnerving calm, he walked to his workbench. His hands moved with practiced precision, shifting tools, inspecting gears, glancing over his blueprints. Everything was in its place. Everything was perfect. Except he knew what she had heard, and it shouldn't have been possible. It's probably nothing, Hazel shrugged, grabbing her bag again. Good night, Grandpa. She waved, heading out the door. Dr. Greaves nodded absently, watching as she disappeared into the evening mist. Then, the moment the door clicked shut, his expression changed. The mild amusement vanished, replaced with something else, something calculating. Slowly, he turned back to the workbench, his voice low and almost to himself. Oh, dear. Next chapter. Dr. Greaves couldn't sleep. He turned over in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, the weight of unease pressing against his ribs. A chirp, his breath caught. Impossible. All of his clockwork birds were flawless. He had checked them 3 times since Hazel left. He had gone over every gear, every spring, every delicate mechanism. And yet that sound, it echoed in his mind. He had even gone so far as to take all 5 birds apart, piece by piece. Nothing. They were perfect. Just as he had designed them. Just as they should be. And yet, an hour later, as he lay in bed, it came again. A chirp, somewhere just beyond hearing. His heart thudded. A trick of the mind? Or something else? He sat up, listening, holding his breath. Silence. He exhaled slowly. Perhaps it was just his imagination. The stress of Hazel's words. The exhaustion of the evening. Yes, that had to be it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he drifted into a restless, uneasy sleep. But just before consciousness slipped away completely, a final, almost mocking chirp. Next chapter. The student would not focus. Rex Argon was trying and failing to place a single small cog into a network of delicate gears and spokes. Stuck again, he muttered, frustration evident but distant, as if his brain had already accepted its own failure. Across the workbench, Dr. Greaves watched calmly. Remember, a clockwork artisan must take their time. Find your pace. Steady hands. Professor Greaves observed quietly, then reached for a pair of tweezers. With effortless precision, he picked up the cog and in one fluid motion slotted it neatly into place. Patience, Greaves said simply. Then he removed the cog and handed it back. Again, Rex took a breath. Focused. This time the cog fit perfectly. See, you did it. Greaves gave him a quick pat on the back. For the first time all morning, Rex looked relieved. The workshop door creaked open. Hazel stepped inside. Rex glanced up and froze. His fingers slipped. The entire clockwork blimp airship he had been carefully assembling wobbled on its stand and crashed to the floor. A loud smash, pieces everywhere. "Oh no," Rex looked at the wreckage in horror. Then, hesitantly, he glanced back up at Hazel with a look that screamed that he never talks to women. Hazel blinked. "Well, that's going to be a lot of work to put back together." Elias, ever patient, simply smiled. "Something to work on next week. We'll go over the basics and rebuild." Rex nodded too quickly. That sounds great. Thank you, Professor." Then, red-faced, he nearly tripped over himself on his way out the door. "Nice to see you again, Miss Hazel." Hazel barely had time to respond before he was gone. She smirked, watching the door swing shut. "I swear, Grandpa, you get the funniest students." "You know, Hazel, some of my students have never talked to a girl in their lives." Hazel, mid-chew, looked up from her bag of potato chips. "Really?" she mumbled, mouth full of chips. Professor Greaves nodded, folding his hands neatly in front of him. "Indeed, I think you gave the poor boy a heart attack." Hazel snorted. Then, before she could stop it, a spray of half-chewed chips flew across the lab. Professor Greaves sighed. She cackled, wiping her mouth with her sleeve. "Me and my bad sense of humor," the professor thought to himself, watching her with exasperation. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, dabbing a single stray crumb off his desk. Hazel grinned at him. "He'll survive." "So, did you find anything with that weird noise?" Hazel asked between bites, casually popping another chip into her mouth. Professor Greaves sighed, rubbing his temples. "Unfortunately not, but it's getting worse." Hazel raised an eyebrow. "Define worse." The professor turned toward his notebook, tapping the page. "It seems to be increasing. I've been tracking it, 1 chirp every 6 hours, then 4, now 2. As of this morning, the noise is doubling every 2 hours. Hazel blinked. "Doubling?" "Yes, which means if the pattern holds, it will soon become—" Before he could finish, a sharp chirp echoed through the lab. They both froze. "Could be mice," Hazel said after a beat, though she didn't sound convinced. "Mice," Professor Greaves repeated dryly. "Yeah, in the walls. Maybe they're, I don't know, scraping against something?" She made a vague hand motion. Professor Greaves folded his arms. "In the walls, yes. That is precisely where it seems to be originating." Hazel frowned. "Wait, you're serious?" The professor nodded. "Yes, the noise isn't coming from any of my machines. I checked them all. But it is coming from somewhere inside this building." Hazel brushed off her hands and stood up. "How long until the next chirp?" Professor Greaves glanced at his notebook. 18 minutes. Hazel's eyes narrowed with mild determination. "Then let's track it down. According to my calculations, it will become constant in 3 to 4 hours," Professor Greaves said, his voice calm but his eyes full of quiet concern. Hazel stretched her arms above her head. "Perfect," she said with a yawn. "That gives me just enough time to tidy up. We already know the noise is leading us somewhere. We just have to wait for it to get fast enough to pinpoint the exact location. So, in the meantime, why not be productive?" The professor folded his arms. "Productive meaning? You double-check your machines. I'll handle the crumbs, and in a few hours, we follow the sound to whatever creepy thing is living in our walls." Professor Greaves exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Fine. But if you start vacuuming while we're trying to listen for the chirps, I will remove you from this investigation." Hazel mock saluted. "Yes, sir." Next chapter. The chirping was increasing, just as Professor Greaves predicted, but it was no longer just chirps. It was shifting, becoming something else. The short, sharp sounds blended together, forming a melody, a tune that felt old, and it was coming from inside the wall. "Well, here we are," Hazel said, standing before the spot where the strange music resonated the strongest. She knocked on the wood paneling. "Hollow." Professor Greaves sighed, already dreading the mess. "Not the wall," he muttered to himself. Hazel was already gone. 30 seconds later, she returned, lugging a hammer so oversized she needed both hands just to lift it. She grinned. "Well?" Professor Greaves stared at the hammer in horrified disbelief. "Where did you even get that?" "A lady never reveals her secrets." The professor ran a hand down his face. "There is no way you are—" Hazel raised the hammer. The melody behind the wall grew stronger. Professor Greaves let out a long, defeated sigh. "Fine, let's see what's in there." The wall splintered. Dust settled in the air. Professor Greaves and Hazel peered inside the hole. A bird, a clockwork bird. It was ancient-looking, covered in layers of dust and time. Its delicate brass frame had long since lost its shine, but it still moved. Its head twitched. Its wings shifted slightly, and from its tiny, intricate frame, the melody continued. Hazel reached in carefully, lifting the delicate automaton and setting it on the floor. As she pulled her hand back, her breath caught. There, on the wooden panel behind it, were 3 words. The failsafe melody. Hazel and Professor Greaves stared at each other. Then the bird let out one final tweet, a soft, almost fragile note. Then silence. Its gears slowed. Its wings stopped. The melody, the chirping, all of it gone. The silence hung thick between them. "Well now," Professor Greaves said, "this is a mystery indeed." Next chapter. Professor Greaves felt sick. Not the kind of sickness that came from a bad meal or exhaustion, but the kind that settled deep in the pit of the soul. He stared at the papers he had pulled from the compartment beneath the clockwork bird. The script was an older form of English, but nothing he couldn't decipher. And the words trembled on the page, not from unsteady handwriting, but from fear. Ruin is coming. The machine is turned on. The course is set, and the errors of men will be paid in full. If you have found this, then know there was a way to stop it. A fragile invention, an unfinished dream, a failsafe against the chaos to come. But I have failed, and now I can only hope another will finish what I could not. Professor Greaves exhaled sharply, the weight of those words pressing against his ribs. "What does it mean?" Hazel's voice pulled him back. He looked up. She was staring at him, brows furrowed, eyes flicking from the papers to his face. His hands trembled as he set them down. "I have a suspicion," he muttered. Hazel sat up straighter. "My old colleague, Professor Aldous Thornwell, did research into this subject. The fractures, the energy surges, the possibility of a countermeasure. He was convinced there was something unnatural at play, something we weren't being told." He paused. "But I've heard recently that the dear professor is missing." Hazel narrowed her eyes. "He must have had an assistant." Greaves perked up. "Yes, he did, but I can't think of his name." Hazel had already pulled out her communicator. Her fingers moved fast. Less than 2 minutes later, she turned the screen toward him. Silas March. Next chapter. Silas March sat in the meeting room with the others. Zeke scanned the room. The weight of what they'd just learned hung over them like a storm cloud. He let out a slow breath. "All right." His voice was low, firm, commanding. "We know the truth. We've heard it. We've felt it." He leaned forward, hands resting on his knees. "Now, here's what happens next. Everyone take your time. Absorb this information. Let it settle. But keep your mouths shut." His gaze swept the room. "We don't know who's watching. We don't know who's listening. We don't know who might take this information and run the wrong way with it." He paused, letting the warning sink in. "We meet here in 2 days, no exceptions." No one argued, no one moved. Zeke stood. "Get your heads straight. Because when we come back," his voice hardened, "we decide what we do next." And so we arrive at the end of the Steampunk Years, Volume 6. The gears have turned, the voices have spoken, and somewhere in the quiet that follows, something lingers. A question, a memory, a note still hanging in the air. Thank you for listening, for walking alongside these characters, for hearing the hidden melodies between the lines, and for making space in your own world for theirs. This volume may have ended, but the story continues, and I encourage you to stay with it, to follow as the path winds deeper into the unknown. Until then, may the stillness guide you, and may the story wait patiently just beyond the next turn.
Workshop where shadows play, a bird chirps wildly night and day. Its gears are worn, its rhythm astray, and its melody pulls the past my way. The notes align, a haunting tune, echoes of a life, a distant room. With every chirp, a puzzle sound to secrets lost and yet unfound. hidden with care. A letter waits in the dusty air. Its trembling words, a failsafe tune to guard against a coming ruin. And there it lies, the unfinished dream, an invention drawn from a broken seam. The melody fits, the pieces align, but to complete it risks the design. Oh, what to do with this fragile light? A chance to halt eternal night. Oh, the bird sings of worlds unseen, a warning bound in its machine. The melody calls to act or to stay, a question of hope in the dark array. The bird falls quiet, its purpose done. The melody fades like the setting sun. In the stillness, the choice remains.